Welcome, Chief.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam Mayor, Mr. Vice Mayor, Council, James Reifschneider, Police Chief, and I'm here to present the study session on Flock Automated License Plate Recognition Technology. Next slide, Madam Clerk, when you're ready. So just an agenda of what we'll cover in the study session presentation. First, an ALPR overview, some information about PAPD's use of ALPR, legal considerations, a Flock timeline, some updates about Flock, some updates about PAPD's own policies, regional use of Flock, some information about the status of our current contract with Flock, as well as the forthcoming report from the independent police auditor. Next slide, please. So first, with regard to ALPR, it's important that we all have a same kind of baseline understanding of what it is. ALPR technology uses a combination of cameras and software to scan license plates of passing vehicles, and then these computer-readable images allow law enforcement to compare plate numbers against plates of wanted vehicles, vehicles associated with wanted persons, or vehicles associated with missing and endangered persons. Next slide, please. So what information is captured by ALPR? So a sample ALPR image from Flock is depicted on the right side of the presentation there. A fixed ALPR system is designed to capture license plates and basic vehicle characteristics. The picture to the right is a typical image we would receive in response to a Flock photograph. It is also date, time, and location stamped. They're placed in high-volume traffic areas with an emphasis on city ingress and egress. Next slide, please. So what information is not captured by Flock? So PAPD has located and oriented our ALPR cameras specifically so that they're capturing images of rear license plates on public roadways, not vehicle occupants or pedestrians. The Flock Falcon ALPR system does not capture the name, address, or personal information of the owner or occupants of the vehicle. According to Flock, as well as my own extensive experience with the system, the Flock Falcon ALPR system does not use facial recognition software. It does not log human characteristics, for example, age, race, or gender of people. And as you can see from a screenshot of the Flock ALPR search fields on the right-hand side, you'll note that all of those fields concern dates, locations, and vehicle characteristics. You'll note that there are no options there to search for human-related characteristics. Next slide, please. So what are the uses and benefits of ALPR for law enforcement? So really the uses fall into two categories: proactive, which I'll refer to as our real-time alerts. So that's when a vehicle passes by one of our cameras. It's a known wanted vehicle. It's a vehicle associated with a missing person, and our dispatch center, as well as our officers in the field, receive a real-time audible and visual alert that a vehicle has been seen at a particular location, and they can direct their attention to that location. There's also a reactive use, investigative, in other words, and that's where our officers or detectives are using the searchable database of ALPR data, often overlaying data that's been captured by Palo Alto's cameras with data that's been captured by cameras in our neighboring jurisdictions, and using that overlaid data to put together the puzzle, so to speak, and connect cases and identify suspects. Real-time alerts allow us to act with a force multiplying effect in that with our diminished current staffing, it allows us to direct attention to places where we know wanted vehicles are. It also allows us to increase efficiency in that regard, in that we're pointing resources at known issues. It also has a deterrent effect in that even if our officers are directed to a location and the vehicle they see either takes off and we're not able to stop it, or sometimes we don't even see the vehicle, it may see us, or even if it flees from us, we've deterred a crime that day. So it puts our officers in a position to be impactful. It also helps us solve crimes already committed using the network effect of regional coordination. It is a key piece of the ALPR puzzle to be able to collaborate with our investigative partners at other agencies in the region, because what we know is that folks who are committing burglaries in Palo Alto are also committing burglaries elsewhere. Folks that are committing violent crimes elsewhere are also committing them in Palo Alto. And so the fact that we can easily share data between investigators is an important piece. Next slide, please. Here's a few examples, illustrative, I think, of the types of cases where the police department has had success in the use of flock. We recently used flock data to quickly locate and arrest 2 suspects in a Palo Alto armed robbery that we later learned had just committed a similar armed robbery in East Palo Alto only minutes earlier. We also used a flock real-time alert to locate and arrest a suspect that was wanted in a shooting homicide in another Bay Area agency. We identified and located suspects responsible for literally dozens of home burglaries in multiple Bay Area cities and multiple Bay Area counties, including multiple overnight occupied residential burglaries right here in Palo Alto. Similarly, we used flock data in collaboration with other agencies to identify commercial burglars that were responsible for a series of downtown restaurant burglaries. We've also used flock real-time alerts to intercept a number of known organized retail theft suspects en route to our shopping centers and downtown business districts and make arrests and thwart thefts on those dates. One thing I want to point out that I think many don't necessarily associate with flock is the use of flock in non-criminal cases. So we have multiple instances where we've been able to use flock data to track the movements and ultimately safely locate an elder who was an endangered missing person, had cognitive impairment, had taken a vehicle without their family's permission, and was a danger to themselves and others on the road and were in fact lost. That's happened more than once. And just recently, we used flock data to locate a teenager who'd been reported missing by their parents after making threats of suicide. A few stats for you with a caveat I'll add at the end. Since 2024, we've identified at least 130 cases where flock data has played an important evidentiary role in identifying and arresting suspects. There are more cases where flock has certainly been used, but those are cases where I can point to flock being a key piece of evidence that got us off on the right foot, or in fact, in some cases was really the only evidence we had to start with, and absent flock, we would not have been able to solve some of those cases. Year to date in 2026 versus the same period in 2025, residential burglaries are down 13%, auto burgs are down 24%. We've seen a 27% reduction in total thefts measured in dollars since 2024. Now, I recognize that some of these reductions have multiple factors that are contributing to these, but I can tell you with confidence that I do believe flock is a contributing factor and a significant one. Next slide, please. So there are obviously legal considerations and legal concerns about flock. Here in Palo Alto, we have a municipal code that governs the use of surveillance technology, of which ALPR is one. As a result, we have a council-approved surveillance use policy that's specific to the department's use of flock ALPR. Then at the state level, there are state laws that in part prohibit out-of-state sharing of ALPR data and prescribe criminal penalties for staff or officers who improperly authorize, or in an unauthorized manner access or use ALPR data. Next slide, please. So what are the components of that ALPR surveillance use policy approved by council? A few high points. Just like any other criminal database, an officer or dispatcher needs to have a need to know and a right to know in order to query any of those databases. Every person who is an authorized and trained user has an individual login, which is captured associated with any specific query. And we control with whom our data is shared. Our local law enforcement contacts are who we share our data with, and we do that via individual MOU with agencies from nearby counties. We retain our data for 30 days unless the data has been flagged as specifically related to a criminal case. You may recall that when we adopted our surveillance use policy, that 30-day retention policy was by far one of the shortest of any agency in the state. What we've seen over the last couple of years is that best practices have actually moved to meet much closer to what we chose to do back then. So I think that's an indication that we were trying to do the right thing. As far as auditing, all queries are logged and auditable, and we have a compliance officer responsible for doing those audits. We'll talk more about that. Next slide, please. Here's a brief timeline of Flock in Palo Alto. Between April and November of 2023 is when our first PAPD Flock cameras were installed. In mid-2023 is when Flock activated a nationwide lookup feature for all of its law enforcement customers. That feature allowed users to search a combined data set of all agency users nationwide, which accounted for more than 6,000 cameras. That particular type of search was only permissible with a full 7-digit license plate. So in other words, you could not search that database with partial plates, vehicle descriptions, etc. You also could not perform a targeted search of any specific agency. In October of 24, Flock disabled that feature for Palo Alto PD, and by early 2025, it had been disabled for all California users. Between January and March of 25, 10 additional Flock cameras were installed here in town for a total of 30. In December of 2025, Palo Alto PD first learned of the activation of nationwide lookup. Next slide, please. So what did we learn about nationwide lookup since then? So we did learn that Palo Alto PD had been included along with those other 6,000 others in the overall nationwide data set. But what we also found was that no Palo Alto PD was actually received by any out-of-state or federal agencies. So to put a fine point on that, at any given time, an agency that performed a search of that overall data set, in theory, could have received data if Palo Alto had, during the 30-day retention period, any data that was responsive to that query. But we did not. And I think that our success in that regard, or some might say luck in that regard, is partially attributable to the foresight we had to have that short retention period and also to have a limited number of cameras that were placed in strategic areas. Nonetheless, we did do a review of our network audit logs, which showed no searches performed by ICE or Customs Border Patrol or Homeland Security for any purpose. No searches by any agency appear to be associated with immigration or reproductive care enforcement. No targeted searches of Palo Alto data by out-of-state or federal agencies. And no searches by out-of-state or federal agencies after the feature was disabled in October of 2024. Next slide, please. So what did Flock do since then? They have increased staffing and resources in compliance with specific emphasis on state-specific legal compliance. They've improved the functionality of their search auditing to make it easier for agencies to do audits and also to customize the type of audits we want to run. They've improved the information they're providing to customers as the product is updated. User settings and changes to user settings are now logged and communicated to the customer. They've also added some restrictions, disabling, as I said, the nationwide lookup for California agencies, prohibiting any sharing between California and non-California agencies, even by MOU, filtering and blocking prohibited searches, and also requiring a standardized FBI NIBRS case type for all searches by any agency. Next slide, please. What have we done at the Palo Alto PD level? So we've augmented our organization audits, which cover our own users, with network audits, which cover the activities of outside agency users. We've increased the frequency of those audits. We're now performing them monthly rather than quarterly. I'm not aware of any agencies doing auditing at that cadence. We are also the only agency of which I'm aware that is choosing to proactively publish monthly organization and network audits to our website for the public to see, as well as having published all historical organization and network audits dating back to our launch in 2023. Next slide, please. Regional use of flock. More than 300 law enforcement agencies in California are currently using flock, and there is really no other fixed ALPR vendor with any significant market share in the state of California. Since 2025, there have been 9 California agencies, 3% of California agency users, that have discontinued their use of flock. Nearly every Santa Clara County and Bay Area law enforcement agency currently uses flock ALPR cameras. Numerous Bay Area cities have recently re-examined their use of flock for the same reason we're conducting this study session tonight. With that, councils in San Jose, Sunnyvale, Los Altos, East Palo Alto, San Francisco, Oakland, Richmond, and Berkeley have voted to continue their use of flock ALPR, recognizing its value. Santa Clara, Los Gatos, Montecito, Campbell, Milpitas, Gilroy, Morgan Hill, Menlo Park, Atherton, and Redwood City have also continued their use without disruption. Mountain View, Los Altos Hills, and Santa Cruz have discontinued their use of flock, and the Santa Clara County Sheriff's Office halted a planned flock rollout. Next slide, please. So here's a visual depiction of use here within Santa Clara County, just to illustrate the ubiquity of flock ALPR among our neighbors. You'll see here that the only 2 law enforcement agencies in the county not presently using flock are Mountain View Police Department and the Santa Clara County Sheriff's Office. As I mentioned, the Santa Clara County Sheriff's Office actually never had flock cameras. They'd been approved for the installation of flock cameras, and in the interim, concerns were raised, and so they opted to halt that deployment and entertain other vendors. Next slide, please. So, questions about the current status of our contract. When we added 10 cameras in late 2024, we consolidated all 30 cameras into one 5-year contract, which has a term through December of 2029. On an annual basis for the next 3 fiscal years, it costs $93,500, with 1/3 of that cost in the next 2 fiscal years covered by grant funding from state DOJ. Our contract, as currently constructed, includes both a clause for termination for convenience and a clause for termination for cause. Next slide. And lastly, I want to address and provide a slight update on the work of the IPA. So Flock has repeatedly engaged with staff and has assured us they will fully cooperate with any information sharing needed for any audit, and has consistently inquired about the status of this audit since we first discussed it in January and February of this year. As you may recall, the city auditor is unable to perform the audit due to a perception of conflict. So as a result, we've turned to the independent police auditor, OIR Group, who has agreed to take this on and produce a report, which will contain an operational assessment of Flock's policies and procedures around a variety of topics, as well as an assessment of PAPD's own internal policies and procedures. We anticipate being able to return to council with that report shortly after the summer break. With that, I will move on to the next slide, which I think is the conclusion. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Chief. We appreciate it. I think I'm going to go first to public comment so that we can hear that and have that inform our discussion tonight. Madam Clerk, how many speakers do we have? I'm guessing.
We have 4 groups, and that's a total of 49, with a total of 49 speakers, including the groups.
How many speakers not in a group?
24, sorry. actually 25 now. There's another hand that was raised in Zoom.
Excuse me, you're out of order, sir. Thank you. All right, well, given that, the four groups, we will give 6 minutes to each group and 1 minute to each individual. And so, Madam Clerk, if you could organize that for us, I would appreciate it.
Our first speaker is Austin M.
Welcome.
Thank you to city staff for preparing the report and to council for this study session. These kinds of sessions are a vitally important component to our democracy. My name is Austin. I'm with Indivisible Palo Alto Plus and the broader Safety Over Surveillance Coalition, comprised of 11 regional organizations, community members, and allies united in response to the revelation that our data was made available to out-of-state and federal agencies by Flock. First, I want to extend an invitation to council, staff, and everyone to an Indivisible Palo Alto Plus Democracy Forum event on Sunday, June 28. It's called Who's Watching? Safeguarding Our Privacy. It will feature speakers with deep expertise on digital privacy and democracy, including Cindy Cohn, recently the Executive Director of Electronic Frontier Foundation. We would love to have you come learn with us. Now for Flock. I've talked with many city council members and members of the public over the last year about the company. One question I hear often is about what our expectations can be about privacy in public places. The answer is complex and nuanced because when we drive, there's a difference between being visible to people passing by and being systematically tracked everywhere you go. Anyone on the street who sees me in one instance probably didn't see and record where I was a few minutes prior. But that's what Flock does. It observes, aggregates, and indexes my time in public. Flock knows where I live, work, shop, receive healthcare, worship, and with whom I associate, all of which would be considered sensitive, personally identifiable information in any other setting. I'm not suspected of a crime. Why does my trip to the supermarket earn me a spot in a government database controlled by a company that so recklessly disregards state law and indeed your own robust policies? My phone is different from ALPR cameras too. I can choose to leave my phone at home or turn it off. I can run a VPN, maintain fine-grained privacy settings, and delete data. I have no such controls with Flock. I can't consent to being tracked or opt to stay home. Social media and credit cards are both also under my own control. In all these cases, my phone, social media, credit cards, any information that is collected about me is not available to the government or law enforcement without a signed warrant from a judge. Finally, I want to address Flock's business model. Despite assurances by the company that it does not sell aggregated data, Flock is fundamentally an AI mass surveillance company whose long-term value depends on monetizing our data. One way it does this is by curating a nationwide proprietary data set to train machine learning models which serve as a competitive moat. Investors like Peter Thiel have poured hundreds of millions of dollars into this company, which will never be able to justify its absurd $8.4 billion valuation at the rate Palo Alto and every other customer pays for the cameras. You may have heard the recent news that the FBI is seeking a single vendor for a nationwide ALPR network of its own. The data, our data, which the city owns, will have been used to position Flock as the front runner, at which point the city's policies and safeguards will be powerless to protect Palo Alto and indeed the broader region from federal overreach. Flock will finally have a customer with pockets deep enough to sustain it, and Peter Thiel will get his payday. For these reasons and more, we call upon the City of Palo Alto to put its values above corporate profits, choose safety over surveillance, and reconsider its relationship with Flock. Thank you.
Our next speaker.
Yeah, I should have announced the beginning of, thank you.
Sure.
No, we during substantive matters, we don't allow audible responses so that all the different people of all different viewpoints feel safe. So you can do this if you like it, we'll see it, but we don't clap or boo or comment. So thank you.
Our next speaker is Kara S.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and council members. I am a 20-year resident of Palo Alto, an attorney specializing in municipal law, a co-leader of Palo Alto Plus's Immigration Rights Action Team, and a member of a newly formed coalition called Safety Over Surveillance Palo Alto. This consists of over 10 regional groups fighting for democracy, equity, and privacy. First, I want to thank the City Council for conducting this study session and for engaging the police auditor. I would also like to express my appreciation for the Palo Alto Police Department and its leadership. My husband and I have raised 2 children here and have felt safe and protected. IPA Plus has conducted several No Kings Day events and numerous public rallies and protests in Palo Alto, and the police department has consistently supported our First Amendment rights. I believe all of us here sincerely appreciate the work and dedication of our police department. Where we diverge is on the use of flock cameras. We are here to ring the alarm bell that proceeding down this path is filled with unintended consequences. Most of these concerns do not relate to the department's internal use of the cameras. Instead, they relate to the city's participation in the national mass surveillance network that Flock and similar companies are creating. Our concern is that as the city dips its foot into this network, it becomes more and more difficult to extract itself. We are opposed to the continued use of flock cameras for the following reasons. Number 1, guardrails are not effective. Despite a detailed surveillance use policy, staff training, and a carefully negotiated contract with Flock, federal and out-of-state agencies were able to access Palo Alto's data for over a year without the department's knowledge. Clearly, the guardrails were not effective here. The municipal code contains a comprehensive surveillance use procedure that does not appear to have been followed. Section 2.30.680 requires an annual surveillance report be submitted to council containing, among other things, a description of how each council-approved surveillance technology was used, including whether it captured images, sound, or information regarding members of the public who are not suspected of engaging in unlawful conduct, and whether and how often data acquired through the use of the surveillance technology was shared with outside entities. Further, when you have a national network valued on its ability to quickly share data among all users, there is an increased risk of data breach, data sharing with unauthorized agencies, and release by Flock of the city's data. The ineffectiveness of guardrails was emphasized in the Berkeley City Attorney memo referenced in my earlier letter to the City Council. Number 2, impact on immigrants. There is abundant evidence that the Flock network data is used by ICE and Border Patrol. Customs and Border Patrol had a pilot contract with Flock which permitted them to access data directly. Further public records requests show that ICE gained side door access by requesting friendly police departments to search on their behalf. This is what happened in Los Altos and Mountain View, where public record responses showed search item terms such as, quote, ICE, quote, immigration. It is likely this also happened in Palo Alto, but since the search term on the network logs was redacted, we can't confirm this. Palo Alto has a large number of immigrant contractors, restaurant workers, and other employees who must travel past Flock's cameras to report to work. We hear over and over again how immigrants fear driving because of the threat of Flock following them. Number 3, Flock is quickly expanding its functionality. Flock was originally rolled out to small suburban communities such as Palo Alto as a way to find stolen vehicles and lost seniors, lost teenagers. It claimed that their cameras only took photos of license plates without identifying a license plate. Now searches can be made without identifying a license plate, thus increasing chances of false arrest. Flock's patent describes its ability to identify attributes of a vehicle without a license plate. The patent also touts the ability to differentiate characteristics of people such as race, gender, clothing worn, and estimates of height and weight. Other AI models developed by Flock are especially trained to identify bicycles and animals. We don't have to speculate about Flock's future application. The patent speaks for itself. Number 4, Flock's program violates the 4th Amendment of the Constitution. We are actively monitoring lawsuits that have been filed both in the peninsula and in other states, particularly on this basis. Number 5, Flock has not demonstrated that it reduces crime or increases closure rates. Flock points to crime reduction trend lines in cities that have deployed Flock. It also counsels police departments to highlight anecdotal cases where they have used Flock to solve crimes. Significantly, there's no published study showing
Your
that
time is
Flock
up.
actually reduces crime or increases closure rates. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Tim M.
Greetings, Council. My name is Tim McKenzie. I am a member of the Silicon Valley Democratic Socialists of America, and we are part of the Safety Over Surveillance Coalition. I'm here to urge you to cancel the Flock contract through a decision of non-renewal when the budget comes up, and barring that, ask for specific policy things to be considered in an audit moving forward. I would like to start with talking about the efficacy of Flock. We just heard some examples of how Flock has been used. I actually have a little bit more faith in local police than it seems that the proponents of Flock do, that good old-fashioned investigative work could solve the problems and the crimes that were talked about in a way that does not put all of us at risk. If you look at May 5th is the specific date I know for the Flock transparency data. If you look at all the ALPR hits that came up, less than 0.5% were involved with cars previously designated on a hot list, meaning the overwhelming supermajority of data is innocent passersby, you and me, going about our daily lives with data stored for up to a month, meaning that without a warrant, police can search where you live, where you go to school, where you have been at various times throughout the day. We are told that we have to give up our privacy, our personal information in the name of public safety. But the reality is that the empirical evidence does not match that claim. It's trivial to fool the license plate readers. Swap the license plate from a vehicle in which you committed a crime, and then someone else will come up. Just in March, a woman was pulled over in Oakland because her license plate got swapped with a vehicle. She had a silver Honda car. The crime-involved vehicle was a black Honda car. So despite claims of a vehicle fingerprint that can track things going on, it's not able to match that. You and I could tell by inspection with our eyes that there is a different color. People are still pulled over. In December, there was a mass shooting at Brown University. The murderer swapped his license plates and was able to go kill a professor in Massachusetts just days later. And closer to home and more recently, there was just a shooting at a mosque in San Diego. The police were specifically told the vehicle and the license plate. It wasn't a swapped license plate. It was the specific license plate and vehicle. There was an ALPR system in place, and the police went to the wrong location, were not there in time to stop the loss of life. We are told that this is a crime prevention tool that will allow us to avoid these mass casualty events. And the empirical evidence does not match that. It is not effective at preventing crime. At best, it can be used after the fact. And in light of this dubious efficacy, we also have to deal with real, tangible harm to specific human beings, individuals, members of our community or communities where ALPRs are brought in. For example, there was a black woman in San Francisco. There was an erroneous notification from ALPRs. She got pulled over and held at gunpoint. A 12-year-old in New Mexico was pulled over and put in handcuffs from an erroneous notification. A black man in Toledo, Ohio was mauled by a police dog after an erroneous notification. A man in Colorado is unable to use his own vehicle because police entered both O, the letter, and 0, the number, when they said this is the crime-involved car. And he keeps getting pulled over despite the fact that his license plate isn't actually involved with the crime. These are specific, real, tangible harms in light of a lack of efficacy that really occurs. We heard that Palo Alto's data, there were no specific images that went out to anyone that made a request. But that does not mean that there was not an illegal search in violation of the Fourth Amendment. If a police officer broke into your house without a warrant, searched through all of your possessions, everything you have, and then said, well, it's okay, we didn't violate the Fourth Amendment because we didn't take anything for evidence, would you accept that? Would you think that is a reasonable statement? Or would you say the fact that the search occurred, even though there was no responsive data, is itself the violation? Everyone here, whether we are on the same side of ALPRs or not, we all care about public safety. We are for public safety. Flock is for profit. Their business model is to sell fear to the police department so that they will convince you, as city council, to set up these cameras to collect our data. Our data is the product. Flock's patent claims the ability to track people by personal or immutable characteristics like height, clothing, walking style, gender, age. They claim a worldwide license for the data. Despite saying you own everything, they say we can retain a worldwide license because they need to exploit workers in the global south to train their AI models. I ask you, please cancel the contract and really support public safety by giving what we need: shelter, healthcare, food, things that meet the basic needs of community members. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Josh W.
Good evening. My name is Josh Waldorf, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Palo Alto Police Officers Association as Vice President. We are here to support the continued use of Flock ALPR technology in Palo Alto. Our officers have a responsibility to protect this community as effectively and responsibly as possible. Flock helps us do that. It helps us locate stolen vehicles. It helps us identify suspects in thefts, burglaries, robberies, and other crimes. It helps in locating missing persons, especially those at risk, vehicles connected to violent crimes, and outstanding suspects. That matters because many suspects do not live in Palo Alto. They come into our city, commit crimes, and leave before officers arrive. As crime becomes more sophisticated, police departments must adapt. Without tools like Flock, we are left trying to solve modern crimes with outdated resources. Flock helps close that gap. From January 2024 to February 2026, we documented 139 patrol-level cases where Flock provided meaningful public safety benefits. These included stolen vehicle recoveries, suspect identifications, arrests, and investigative leads generated by officers in the field. Those cases are not just numbers. They represent victims. They represent stolen property recovered, suspects identified, and investigations that continued because officers had timely information. Another benefit attributed to Flock is officers working at the Stanford Shopping Center in conjunction with Flock have seen a 72% decrease in reported retail loss from 2022 to 2025. Flock helps us work smarter. Palo Alto does not have unlimited police staffing. This technology does not replace officers, good police work, or constitutional standards. It helps officers focus their efforts, respond faster, and follow evidence-based leads instead of relying on mere chance. Use of ALPR technology is so woven into current police practices that taking this tool away would be equivalent to taking away the ability to dust for fingerprints or swab for DNA. We understand the concerns about privacy. Those concerns are legitimate and taken seriously. The department's ALPR website explains the system, the safeguards in place, including limits on what the cameras capture, restrictions on access, audit trails, and data retention. Those safeguards do matter. The community has a right to expect public safety technology to be governed by policy, training, transparency, and accountability, and we support that. The community also has a right to expect that effective tools remain available to help solve crimes, protect victims, locate missing persons, and identify suspects. This is about balance, protecting privacy, while also protecting our neighborhoods, businesses, families, and visitors. We believe Palo Alto can do both. For those reasons, the Palo Alto Police Officers Association respectfully supports the continued use of Flock ALPR technology. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Charlie W.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council, and staff. Charlie Wydans, Palo Alto Chamber of Commerce. In April of 2023, the Chamber spoke in favor of the Automated License Plate Reader Initiative, and today we are back to support the continuation because the data shows it works exactly as intended. The safety and enforcement impact is clear. At the Stanford Shopping Center, shortly after implementation, a Flock alert flagged a stolen vehicle tied to armed carjacking. Palo Alto police safely intercepted the suspects, preventing a potentially violent crime on site. For the organized retail theft, Flock data paired with the organized retail theft grant-funded patrols helped dismantle crews executing high-profile smash-and-grab robberies at major retailers, and those takeover-style incidents have since ceased. Downtown restaurant burglaries. Following a string of nighttime commercial break-ins, investigators used Flock data to track suspect vehicles, halting this burglary series. In 2025 alone, Flock contributed to 64 incidents, resulting in 24 arrests.
Your time is up.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Charles S.
As a longtime Palo Alto resident, I'm quite distressed that our city has chosen to build a camera surveillance system that can track me as I go around town and share the data with the whole state, and in principle through sharing anywhere in the country or beyond. And what this means for me personally is that, for example, if I go to an anti-ICE protest, I have to worry that my presence there is being shared with ICE, and I could be added to a list, harassed as a result of that, and potentially with the direction our national politics is headed, maybe imprisoned for political dissent down the road. So I respectfully ask that you consider ending the Flock contract and immediately covering or removing the cameras. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Fritz K.
Dear Mayor, City Council members, my name is Fritz Kohler. I've been a resident in Palo Alto for over 30 years. I'm also a lawyer who reviews lots of SaaS contracts similar to the one with Flock. I have limited time, so I'll keep it simple. It doesn't matter how good a policy, a contract, any other activities are on the Palo Alto side. When we're dealing with companies like Flock that are prioritizing large-scale data matters, et cetera, What matters is what happens on their side. And to date, we really can't trust what they've done. It'll be interesting to see what the audit comes up with, but I'm not sure that they'll actually really understand what's happening on the flock side. All the incentives on their side are going in the wrong direction and not in the interest of Palo Alto. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Emily B.
Hi, I'm a 4-year resident of Palo Alto. Love it here with my husband and soon-to-be resident, baby Isabella, who I have with me today. So I think the best form of the argument for why flock would exist, as many have articulated, would be it keeps our community safer. I think anecdotes are great. We're scientific minds here in the Bay Area. Evidence is better. There's only a handful of studies on ALPR readers, but if you review them, they almost all show little to no net effect. When you take out the all the correlation is not causation stuff, I think those independent studies show not a lot. And where there is some impact is not really problems Palo Alto has. It's not particularly effective for property crimes and the type that we have, like petty thefts, smash and grabs. That's just not what the studies show outside of ones that Flock has funded themselves. So I'm not sure that premise is true. Thanks.
Our next speaker is Jim.
Greetings. My name is Jim Kozelka. I've lived here in Palo Alto for over 40 years. I'm here tonight to oppose the use of ALPR surveillance in Palo Alto because at its core, it's a violation of our Fourth Amendment rights. Some argue that ALPR's violation of these constitutional rights is moot because by just owning and using a cell phone, one essentially forfeits those rights. This is a specious argument at best. We choose to have a cell phone. We can use apps that don't track us. We can select privacy settings, deny cookies, etc. Also, as California residents, we have a right to know which data a company has on us and request that it be deleted. If law enforcement wants data from our cell phone carrier, they need a signed warrant from a judge. We have none of the above control or protections with ALPR technology. It's imposed on us without our consent. Please choose our safety over their surveillance.
Our next speaker is Maria.
Hello. Although I live here now, I was born in the Soviet Union. I know that mass surveillance is dangerous because it turns everyone into a subject of suspicion. Flock supporters often say there is no expectation of privacy on a public street. The police officers can always watch a car drive by, but Flock creates a vast database that exposes where people have been and what communities they belong to. Yes, people, because cars are people most of the time. Traditional policing starts with suspect and gathers evidence, but Flock gathers information on everyone first and search comes later. This is a fundamentally different relationship between citizenship and government. Democracy depends on freedom of association. People should not have to worry what they're driving to a protest, a religious service, or an immigration rights event may place them in a government database. We're told that data guardrails will protect us, but once data exists, it's a target. Palo Alto cannot fully control what future federal administrations will want, but it can control whether it creates a database of residents and visitors' movements. We've already seen sensitive data collected for one purpose, later demanded for another.
Your time is up.
Strongest protection is not collecting data in the first.
Our next speaker is Matt S.
Hi, my name is Matt Schlegel. Please cancel the contract with Flock. They can't be trusted. The successes reported here today are anecdotal. Flock trains law enforcement to share anecdotal evidence, and we're not hearing statistic-based evidence. In Palo Alto, thousands of outside searches were run on our data, and you reasonably thought that that was impossible, but it wasn't, and it happened, and that should be cause for canceling the contract. We were told it's okay because the results weren't returned, but that's not accountability. If someone searches your house with no warrant and doesn't find anything, that's still a violation of your rights. And even worse, a federal DHS policy allows ICE to search our data with no trace left in the logs, so we don't know whether or not they actually saw it. So please cancel the contract. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Melissa D.
I'm Melissa Dinwiddie, founder of Indivisible Palo Alto Plus. Because of my organizing work, the federal government would like to label me a domestic terrorist. These cameras do not make me feel safe. It only tracks your car is a legal fiction. Your plate is registered to you. It's attached to your name, your address, your movements, no warrant required. Flock cameras have been used to track abortion seekers, to assist ICE, and the search terms "no kings" and "protesters" have appeared in search logs. I trust our officers. I do not trust the infrastructure we're leaving in place for whoever comes next. Please cancel this contract. We need safety, not surveillance. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Tricia D.
Hello, council members. I'm a longtime Palo Alto resident, and I'm against Flock to the risk of aggregated Flock data being used by combining with other databases. This federal government does not follow the law. I think we can agree about that. There's so many examples. And it wants aggregated nationwide license plate data reported by Wired. Flock is only one of the two companies that can do that. Another example of where, just think about the things that they could do by combining databases. The post office is proposing only mailing ballots to voters quote, registered with the federal government. This was reported by Democracy Docket. Will future voters driving to a voting center be intimidated? Think about it. Use your creativity. That doesn't take a lot to think about how you could combine Flock data with a whole lot of other things and be able to really destroy the community of this country. I rely on you guys. You're my last line of defense.
Your time is up. Thank you. Our next speaker is David P.
Hello, everyone. I first want to say a big thank you to this chief and his very best buddies over here in uniform. I appreciate all the diligent work you do every day. And I want to say I worked in San Francisco in the Mission District in a mental health clinic for 30 years. Since Donald Trump has taken office, the number of people that have come to the clinic, predominantly Latino, has dropped off dramatically. And so even if all the rules and regulations that would prevent the local police department from sharing information with ICE were accurate, which I'm not sure they are, but let's say even if that was accurate, there's still a reputation within the community that is that the federal government is not trustworthy, and because of that, our community suffers. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Lenore D.
Many of us here this evening are very concerned, and even more than concerned, we're alarmed about the presence of Flock cameras in our communities. We are aware that Flock has no compunctions about sharing information with entities that will cause us harm. In other words, quote, flocking, unquote, to the highest bidder. And thanks to the person who mentioned the intervention of Peter Thiel. Flock has been known to pass on data to federal departments such as Homeland Security, Homeland to ICE. In this climate of federally induced fear, we who are commenting tonight fear for the safety of our neighbors and we also fear for ourselves. So many of us have joined in peaceful demonstrations and other gatherings, often informative in nature, supporting our constitutional rights and the need to respect and follow the rule of law. Sharing our information without our consents violates these rights as well as negates the rule of law. We recognize that City Council members and other city officials have time and again supported us at these demonstrations, and you who have spoken out are also in danger because of Flock. It's a common danger for all of us. Please disassociate from Flock. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Hillary S.
I grew up in Palo Alto, and I'm also a resident. Sorry. I think we need to rebuild our civic space, and I'm leading small groups of people onto the sidewalk to protest some of the obvious things that are wrong right now. And it's really scary to look up and see I am surrounded by cameras. We were at the train station, and I looked up from a sentence that said, surveillance is bad, and I saw 3 cameras, and I went, oh boy, you didn't look up before you started writing, but you do have your right to do that. And we don't need to be scared. And I'm scared, even more scared for the people that I've driven a really old car in Palo Alto and been harassed for it. So I already have kind of an iffy relationship sometimes with officers because they pull you over just because you're driving an old car. And I get it. You know, maybe I look like some dangerous guy. But the thing was, it made me a little more iffy when I see that car. And then when I see the cameras and I say,
your time is up.
Okay, thank you.
Our next speaker is Pierre L.
Hi, I'm here on support of a lot of the things that have been said, and I just want to help you follow the money. So Flock is a company that's valued at about $8 billion out of the last round of financing, which was last month, April 16th. The revenue are estimated, they're not public, but the revenue are estimated at $300 million. They have 90,000 cameras, so that gives you a revenue per camera of about $3,000 per year, $3,000 per year, and the valuation per camera of about $83K, based on an estimated 3-year contract. What they have to grow into the valuation, right? And what can they do? They can have new users, and that's, for instance, a contract with the FBI would be a new user, and that would give them an additional 10% on the revenues. They can have new usage, and new usage is basically using all the patents that you've heard about, and all the other thing they can do with the camera, because essentially they invented mass surveillance as a service. And the last thing they can do is to go into monopoly pricing.
Our next speaker is Emma B.
Thank you for your time today. My name is Emma Brenskill. Block has repeatedly shared data in a way that is inconsistent with many communities' policies. While I appreciate that Block has tried to respond to some of these concerns, independent records keep showing that those safeguards fail, as in Cleveland earlier this year. Intentionally or unintentionally, Block has built a software architecture that makes misuse easy and oversight hard. Ultimately, Flock has repeatedly shown itself not to be a trustworthy holder of this incredibly sensitive and powerful data. Thank you.
Our next speaker is KBT.
I do not accept the argument that these ALPR cameras with Flock, or actually any company, by the way, because there's others on the market, they are not like the old ALPR cameras that we've had for 100 years. There is AI, okay? And the AI gets it wrong. So we have lots of problems with that because they are then relying on something that is coded, and there are tons of examples where AI has screwed things up. It can't even spell strawberry, okay? And they have mistaken numbers. There was a case in Denver where a man was pulled over and he was attacked by their police dog because they screwed up in the ALPR AI alert, a 2 and a 7, okay? And they didn't even bother waiting to check his registration in his car to make sure that that was actually his car that he owned, because the number they had, they thought it was stolen, okay? So these things are dangerous, and they're trusting AI instead of trained human detectives who are much better than a stupid amount of code. Thank you. Cancel the contract.
Our next speaker is Ariel.
So a common argument I hear is that flock is really no different than a cop standing on a street corner with a notepad taking notes, but how many cops would you need to equal all of the ALPRs? Probably like 20 of them per street corner at all times, and buildings full of analysts to even get close to what flock does. And I don't think anybody would feel safe under that level of surveillance. And this is at a time when the federal government, the president has tried to designate journalists and protesters as terrorists. I am a protester with a journalism degree, so I don't like that very much. And once this infrastructure, the physical cameras exists, it is there. It can be misused at the click of a button. So it doesn't really matter if you guys are doing a good job now of using it ethically, or if anyone is, it can be misused at any time as long as the physical cameras are up. I used to think, thank God we would never be like China or North Korea. Thank God that wouldn't happen in America. I am disappointed, to say the very least. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Hansel A.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Hansel Aguilar. I am a Santa Clara resident. I am a sociologist, a migrant from Honduras, a former law enforcement officer, and I am spent over 10 years in civilian oversight of law enforcement. The letter I submitted to you provides a full analytical case. Tonight, I want to leave you with one point. The independent research literature, including the most current review published in the Cambridge Journal of Evidence-Based Policing, finds that the ALPR's effect on crime is equivocal. In the better evidence alternatives, problem-oriented policing, hotspots policing, and crime and prevention through environmental design did not require mass data collection. Last week, the Associated Press reported that at least 10 people in ICE detention have died by suicide since January 2025. I'm not claiming any specific tool has caused any specific death. I'm asking whether the infrastructure the council is being asked to govern is one that earns the community's continued participation, knowing what the system it feeds is now producing. This is a question of conscience as much as policy. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Hamilton H.
The biggest privacy risk is not the real-time hot list alert, which only stores wanted vehicles. It is the historical database of where ordinary residents drive and who can search it. Here are some policy options. You could disable sharing of flock data with outside agencies except through written request. This will likely reduce searches of Palo Alto data by roughly 100x. 2, you could disable storing flock historical data by purging data within minutes of uploading it, as New Hampshire requires by law. 3, you could request an evaluation of potential flock replacements to find a preferred, reputable vendor in collaboration with Mountain View and Santa Clara County and other agencies displeased with flock privacy, including switching to a secure architecture. In conclusion, the real policy question to debate tonight is how important is PAPD collaboration with other police departments in crime fighting versus significant improvements to citizen privacy? Thank you.
Our next speaker is Herb B.
We've been told that flock does not log personal information, but the Palo Alto Police Department has access to all that flock has recorded in Palo Alto, and I'm not aware of anything in any of our policies of what the council believes or the police department should be logging personal information on all those license plate owners. And that, even though you don't keep the license plates pictures, you can still keep all that data over time. And in the distant past, yes, it's not violating First Amendment rights to take a picture of somebody in a public place, but if you are monitoring that and keeping a dossier of who's there for a period of time, I think you are violating it. So, well,
Your time is up.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is UDD.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council members, and staff. Uridian Palo Alto resident. Thank you, Chief Ralph Snyder, for the thoughtful analysis and ongoing work on this issue. I support a balanced approach to new technologies as like FLOC. One of the fundamental responsibilities of local government is to help keep our community safe. Based on the data presented tonight, FLOC has helped recover stolen vehicles, missing persons, and assist in solving crimes. We have also seen positive results in South San Jose and other jurisdictions. At the same time, I understand and respect concerns regarding privacy, oversight, and accountability. These concerns deserve to be taken seriously. I believe the right path forward is thoughtful deployment with strong safeguards, transparency, and regular reviews. As technology evolves, our policies should also evolve. We should continue evaluating outcomes, making adjustments when needed, and ensuring these tools are used responsibly while protecting civil liberties, leaving no gaps in between. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Winter D.
Yes. Surveillance by its very nature is wide open to abuse, as seen over the last 65 years in our country as whistleblower after whistleblower reveals it. I was illegally surveilled on a grand scale for years for exercising my nonviolent protected constitutional rights and have a fat FBI file to prove it. Just as our former city manager, Jim Keene, announced that he too was subject to illegal surveillance and he had his file. Surveillance is dangerous, not just crime, but surveillance is dangerous. It took more than 5 months for FLOC to inform all other law enforcement agencies in California of the problem after they informed us, which was months after they had supposedly fixed the problems. FLOC can't be trusted, and surveillance is
Your time is up.
Dangerous path to embrace.
Our next speaker is Roddy.
Hi, my name is Roddy, and I am a citizen of Bay Area and also frequent to Palo Alto. I urge the leaders of this community to please listen to your constituents. Please cancel the FLOC contract. There is one thing that we can be sure of is that at any point in time, FLOC systems or any ALPR systems can be subpoenaed for their data without having to inform anyone. This was confirmed to us by a FLOC representative in the El Cerrito hearing. I urge you to not believe what FLOC says at face value. They are a sales company. They're going to do and say whatever that sells the technology. Please do your due diligence. If you're looking at statistics in a scientific way and you're not looking at correlation rather than causation, you'll see that FLOC is not doing anything meaningful for communities. Please do not prioritize property.
Your time is up.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Batman.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good, because I have a very firm warning for you. FLOC is not to be trusted. They give backdoor access to ICE. By law, do not show up in your audits. You will not know if ICE is there because they do not want you to know that they are there. And I have to say, with not one, but 2 potential ICE detention centers potentially coming online within the next year in both FCI Dublin and Gilroy, FLOC is a dangerous choice to go with. They are not trustworthy. They are not going to collaborate with you. They will send your data to whoever pays the most. So please, I'm imploring you, make the right decision and shut them down. We can have a discussion about ALPRs another day, but in this day and age, we need to play this smart. We need to play this carefully, because otherwise, your people, my people will be hurt.
And that concludes public comment on study session item 2.
All right, well, thank you, Madam Clerk, and thank you to all of the speakers tonight. We certainly appreciate your input and appreciate you taking the time to come and share it with us. So with that, I'll bring it back to the dais. This is a study session where we can ask questions and share direction. There won't be motion practice tonight, but we can certainly provide feedback. And I believe this is likely to come back to council again in a couple of months. I can't remember the exact date. All right, so with that, colleagues, who would like to kick us off? All right, Councilmember Rectal.
So, Chief, okay, when the council originally approved Flock, we went through and did a lot of work and got this MOU designed and all these restrictions on it. And the nationwide search came and they kind of bypassed that. And so how do we know that down the road they're not going to bypass our constraints again?
So I think the best way I can answer that question is, I think that we took for granted that we understood the universe of features that were available, and so we took for granted, Palo Alto PD that is, that we could focus our auditing in a certain way. We now realize that there was more to the universe, and so we've expanded the nature and frequency of our audits, and so were a similar feature or the same feature to be reactivated tomorrow, even if Flock didn't tell us about it, the auditing we have in place now would detect it within 30 days when we would do our next audit. So I think that I would answer that question in two ways. One, I think we're better situated to see if there are any issues going forward than we were before because we've improved upon our auditing. I think in addition to that, based on the conversations I've had with Flock, up into including multiple conversations with their CEO and chief legal officer, I do think that they understand the gravity of the issue, and at least my take at this point is that the admittedly very frustrating situation that we encountered here was the result of, I'll say, poor oversight as opposed to malice or any nefarious intent.
Okay. So we share our camera data with other communities, and for that, they fill out a form and send it in. Can they give physical descriptions? Do you have to need a full 7-digit license plate? What do other communities need to get our information?
If those other local law enforcement agencies have signed the sharing MOU with us, then they have the same search access that our officers do. So in other words, if they're looking for, if a crime happens in Menlo Park and a victim describes a green panel van with a partial license plate, Menlo Park is able to search Palo Alto data amongst any other data they have access to for a green panel van with a partial plate.
Okay. There's concerns about false detections. How accurate are the license plate readers?
I believe that the number that's reported is better than 99% accurate, but I think actually, if I may, there's a really important piece that goes along with that I think is actually more important than the statistical accuracy of the cameras, which is to say that the instances that were described by some of the speakers were all induced not by camera error alone, but by camera error compounded by human error. And what I mean by that is our policy expressly says that if you are going to contact or stop a vehicle as a result of an ALPR notification, the officer must make a hand verification that the plate that is displayed on the vehicle is in fact the plate associated with the hit. So even if the camera does misread an O for a 0 or a 7 for an L, then the officer should detect that before making that stop. So in those instances described, the officers did not make that hand verification.
So California's had this law in the books, SB 34, for quite a while, but yet the nationwide search was rolled out, even though that violated California law. And how did that happen? How did Flock institute something that was against California law?
So I can only relay what's been relayed to me and what my understanding is, since I wasn't part of Flock then nor now. What I can say is I think Flock at the time, you have to understand Flock was still a relatively new company, and frankly still is a relatively new company in the whole scheme of things, and was growing dramatically, and candidly I think was growing too fast. I think that they were dedicating their resources, as many startups do, to product development and sales, and not enough resources to legal compliance and the other stuff that doesn't generate revenue. So I think that they probably were not dedicating, and in fact will admit that they weren't dedicating enough time and resources to individual state-by-state legal compliance, and I think that's one of the changes they've since made.
Okay. We've heard news reports of police officers using Flock to track their girlfriend and things like that. Does Palo Alto prevent that, and if so, how do we do that?
Well, I can say we have an audit system in place to track and to look at the searches that are being done by our officers on a monthly basis. I'll also point out that there are substantial both administrative and criminal penalties for exactly the behavior you're describing. So were an officer to do that, it would be no different than using an existing DMV database or county criminal justice database to search up an ex-girlfriend or the like. And in that case, it would not only be likely grounds for termination from an administrative perspective, but it would also subject them to criminal prosecution under state law.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Lythcott-Haims.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Chief, look, this isn't about you guys. We are proud of the police department we have. We're talking about a much broader set of concerns. So please don't take any of this personally. No one questions that the Flock cameras assist you in apprehending criminals and locating those who may be in harm's way. You've given us great examples. The question is, does the rate of such incidents outweigh the risks to privacy that are guaranteed to us under the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution? Also, is there a potential for misuse of these data on the part of Flock or by law enforcement officials at any level of our government, from the federal all the way down to the most local? We know from the news that the answer elsewhere has been yes. I would have had a concern about the balance of privacy versus the ability to aid law enforcement at any time in my adult existence. But the current federal administration, unabashedly authoritarian, makes me deeply concerned about the safety of all humans who live in our country in the present moment, including those whose plates may be searchable by the federal government. It concerns me that we only learned about their problematic practice in December of 2025. Only after it had long been discontinued. It makes me fear that there's insufficient communication between us and this vendor. You're making it out like we didn't know the right search, we didn't know the full universe of possibilities in their database. But I think as we read the news, it's clear that they have had other intentions and they've now gotten caught. So this is a vendor that has violated California law, violated their agreement with the city of Palo Alto and other cities, and it makes me very wary about going forward with them as a result. So I've been interested in, who are these Flock people? What do we know about them? There have been some conversations tonight about associations with the founder of Palantir, Peter Thiel. I've been reading up on Flock. I've been watching interviews between their co-founder and CEO, Garrett Langley, to try to get where he's coming from. Because a startup making some mistakes, being understaffed, sort of recklessly growing without making sure that everything was buckled up is one thing. But it's also possible that they've put this company in place for the very purpose of offering mass surveillance to an authoritarian federal government. And so that is my concern. The leadership, according to the ACLU, the leadership at Flock has gone on the offense with their rhetoric, adopting the attitude that, in essence, if you're concerned at all about mass surveillance and limiting the power of law enforcement, you're essentially supporting criminals. And it's just nowhere near that simple. We're actually trying to protect the vast majority of us from an overreaching authoritarian government. Which seems about to be aided by Flock with this FBI contract coming online. In fact, the CEO and founder, Garrett Langley, has bragged about brute forcing local governments to buy their technology. So I really feel that we're on a precipice. And Palo Alto is just a tiny little tip of the iceberg on this. Again, I'm not worried about any of y'all. I'm worried about us being complicit in a nationwide system to systemically dismantle Fourth Amendment rights of Americans. That's it for me. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Stone.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So, Chief, several follow-up questions for you. You laid out, both in the report and your presentation, a lot of individual success stories that are very meaningful, touching, and overall, I think, good evidence in us evaluating this system. But how does the department evaluate the overall effectiveness of the flock system? We heard kind of many public speakers tonight talk about lack of data. You provided us some compelling numbers as far as just downward trends in property theft, but as you said yourself in your presentation, flock is likely a factor in that. And I know overall trends in that space have been downward sloping over the last year across the country, which is great. Are there measurable outcomes such as like clearance rates, recovery rates, suspect identification rates, response times that have improved since deployment that the department has been able to track to really assess this?
I don't have those stats for you, unfortunately. I will say that precisely because of the shortcomings you point out, in that there are so many factors that impact overall crime rates, that's precisely why we've chosen to provide the council with a variety of detailed case studies, because where we can't say that over an extended period of time there's been a decline in crime that we can directly attribute by causation and not correlation to flock, we can point to some very specific cases, some of which involve very violent crime and very violent people, that were solved using flock technology, and in some cases I'm confident would not have been solved were it not for flock technology.
Thank you. From the department's perspective, what operational capabilities would be lost if the city chose not to renew or continue the flock program? Are there specific categories of crimes or investigations where officers would be significantly less effective without this technology? They were deactivated. Can you talk about like alternative tools, resources, et cetera, that would have to be maybe redirected then to be able to continue to maintain the level of service that the community expects?
So I'll use first the residential burglary trend, and in particular the group of cases I described earlier. In that particular, because I think it's a good illustration of exactly the type of complex multi-jurisdictional case that might have gone unsolved were it not for the use of flock and the overlay of data from multiple agencies. So in that particular case, we had a very small residential neighborhood that was experiencing an uncharacteristic spike in residential burglaries, a number of which happened during the overnight hours when houses could reasonably be expected to be occupied and were occupied. And we had a neighborhood that was very frightened because they'd never seen anything like this before. They in fact asked to have a community meeting to discuss it. Ultimately, using flock technology, we were able to compare data of vehicles leaving and entering that area with vehicles leaving and entering an area in another county across the bay that was experiencing a similar spike in residential burglaries. And it was only with that lead where we were able to link together cars in two different spots that we were then able to go get a search warrant for additional cell phone data, et cetera, and build out a case that ultimately connected these suspects to dozens of residential burglaries in multiple counties and multiple cities. So I think that's the type of case where, you know, any type of information that we can compare and connect with information from similar cases in other jurisdictions would be negatively impacted. I think the easy one, obviously, is stolen vehicles and stolen plates, and those are important for a couple of reasons. Not only because, yes, it's important to regain someone's stolen vehicle, and return it to them, but also because we know that stolen vehicles are frequently stolen for the specific purpose of committing more serious offenses. And so to the extent that we can be notified in real time to the presence of a stolen vehicle on our roadway and have officers there, we can hopefully deter more serious offenses.
Thank you. One of the speakers addressed recent patents from Flock with just emerging technologies and ALPR, some really concerning forward direction on surveillance that goes far beyond what we are allowing currently with Flock. I guess we have control over any additional functions that would be added to our system here in Palo Alto, correct? Beyond what you described earlier tonight?
Yes, and in fact, if we became aware that a new feature was available and we wanted to pursue the use of that new feature, like facial recognition, for example, by ordinance, we'd be required to come back to this council with a new surveillance ordinance to ask for permission to use that technology. I'm not saying we would ask for that permission, but we'd be required by ordinance to do so. One thing I also want to point out too, or actually 2 points, is one, Flock has 2 separate products, and I think it's worth noting. In keeping with their bird theme, our cameras are Flock Falcon cameras that are specifically and only ALPR functioning cameras. Flock also sells or leases a Flock Condor camera, which is a more traditional surveillance camera with AI capabilities to include the possible future addition of facial recognition. So that's not the product that we have deployed on our streets.
Thank you. And to deploy those would require direction from the council.
Absolutely.
Thank you on that time.
Councilmember Liu.
Thank you. Just a few questions. I'm curious if there are preliminary actions or if there's any scope for the independent police auditor to think about some of the concepts that were mentioned by public commenter on restricting the agencies that could search our that can be part of the network that search our logs, and or reducing retention significantly further to anywhere from minutes to a week or something instead of 30 days.
I think the answer is certainly yes. There's room to augment that scope or form that scope before that report's finalized. I also would firmly expect that the auditor's report would include an analysis of best practices around retention periods and some of the concepts you're talking about.
Yeah, I think trying to do the math of whether that is feasible, whether we will still get useful data from our neighboring cities if we do such a move, or whether there would be downstream network effects would be useful, getting a sense of whether making any of those changes would change any of the positive stories or positive outcomes that we've talked about would be useful. And so I think this is really discrete and analyzable work that I think would be useful to do. I think it'd also be useful to get a clear read on some of the metrics. I realize that there aren't clean, neatly buttoned up academic studies that can show X% crime reduction or X% clearance rate change, that nothing like that will be available for several years just because of how studies work. But I think there are reasonable metrics that we can gauge from ourselves. We can look at the cases that Flock was involved in, and to your point, we can sort of confidently judge whether, or we can judge with a confidence level of whether Flock definitely aided this positive outcome or was sort of useful in a tertiary sense. We can get a metric. I think it will be useful to have a story of here are the X crimes that were cleared in part due to Flock. That helps us understand, and also gauge like what % of those were serious crimes, minor crimes, what % of those were potentially stolen vehicles sort of driving around the city and not actually causing any sort of direct crime or impact to the community. Getting that and getting something that we can actually weigh so we can understand what the trade-off of public safety and privacy actually looks like, I think is useful. Overall, I'm really grateful that we have advanced good policies and good retention and are publishing our audits, but obviously I'm still concerned and want to see how much further we can go. There's a larger conversation to be had regionally about what buying power and a Santa Clara County or San Mateo County style network could actually get us. hope that is something that we can talk about in the next conversation, or that our colleagues in the city association or a representative on the city association can take up. But overall, I really appreciate the report. I appreciate the public comment, and I think there's a lot of actionable clarification we can do going into the next time we hear this.
Councilmember Lauring.
Yeah, thanks. First, I want to just comment on two items, one in the report and one that you brought up, the latter of which is when you were commenting on the apprehension of a suspect that was identified through this license plate reader. A couple of the case studies, as you just pointed out, sort of confused the identification of a possible suspect and the apprehension interrogation. There are rules of engagement in each force, and I know that what was described does not describe the rules of engagement in Palo Alto PD. So I'm glad that you clarified that, notwithstanding that it happens. And the second thing is that a couple of these, I guess you would say, softer cases were very informative. The gentleman who had cognition problems and had to be retrieved, and maybe worse or better in the case because the person was found, the person with mental health. So in these cases, you might have saved 2 lives there. So I think there is value here that is identifiable benefit of this system, notwithstanding everything that I've heard tonight. So I just want to first get that on the table. In the gap between mid-23 and October 24, when the Palo Alto data was exposed for where sort of a series of questions here. What was the person getting? Were they finding, if they didn't, but if they got it, would they get a license plate number? Or how could it then move along to a person's home address or ICE breaking in there relative to how we're using this information? I don't quite understand the flow of that to some of the things that we heard about.
So the particular feature we're talking about, nationwide lookup, required that the searcher already have a complete license plate. So with that complete license plate, they could have queried without using Flock at all an existing law enforcement database to get the registered owner information for that vehicle, and then potentially used that registered owner name to find a driver's license or other information. So if an officer begins an investigation by already having a full license plate number, that license plate number can already be used to derive the name and address of the registered owner of the vehicle. In this particular case, what would have happened is querying a full license plate number in Flock, any query will result in you getting essentially a grouping of photos, if any exist, of that particular license plate if it's been captured by anyone with whom you're sharing information or that is sharing with you. And then you would click on individual images and it would provide you with that thumbnail photo as well as a date and time stamp and a location for where that vehicle was when the photo was taken. The Flock database itself does not include any additional personal or person information beyond that. The officer would then have to pivot to already existing law enforcement databases to go any further.
Okay, good. That's very helpful. I still don't know how that could possibly get to ICE, but I understand the problems that we're seeing in America today, so I'm not disrespecting those comments. I guess what it comes down to, and sort of in empathy to what my colleagues are saying, is that my question at this point is, what's changed? Because you have a company that apparently has broken the law. They fell asleep at the switch of the software. They didn't notify their client, and because it's been a long, and they didn't do anything with the CEO or the management team. You know, usually when something like this happens, the first one to go is the CEO, and that might have been the thing to do here. I don't know, but it doesn't seem like there's a lot of changes. So how can we have a comfort level going forward with this from the same CEO and under the circumstances of, you know, bad ethics and breaking the law? That seems like what it's going to come down to here with this organization.
So as best I can relay what was shared with me by Flock's leadership is that they essentially acknowledged that when they founded the company, they viewed themselves as providing law enforcement with a tool, but that it was up to the using agency to be responsible for knowing what the applicable laws were when they went to use the tool. The clumsy analogy that they presented was if they were making a battering ram instead of an ALPR system, that they would not go with you every time you took the battering ram out and make sure you were only using it when you could lawfully do so. I call that a clumsy analogy because I don't think it really fits, and I think they now acknowledge that that doesn't fit either, and that they have a lot more responsibility to make sure that their customers are in the best position possible to use their product only in a way that's lawful. So I think what has changed, at least from my experience as a customer, is that they appear to have become more knowledgeable and more cognizant of the individualized laws that are applicable to the use of their product on a state-by-state basis.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Burt.
Thank you. So first, thanks for a very informative report, and really thanks to members of the public for a lot of the issues that they have raised, even if some of them are contradictory, whether on the one hand it might require us to have 20 more officers and another speaker saying they're really not effective. I think that it boils down to a number of issues that hopefully we're going to be able to really receive important insights on from our independent police auditor. So it's how secure is the system? I don't know if the auditor is going to be really able to look at how effective the system is, the value of it. And then we have a system that is basically a tool, but in the hands of whom and what sorts of intentions might they have? And I was somewhat assured by the acknowledgement by Flock's management that they had not invested in some of the safeguards that are important to us, adequately invested. They were growing as a company. But when I read about some of the comments by the CEO when these criticisms occurred of accusing the critics of normalizing lawlessness and desire to see murderers go free, that's a real alarm to me about whether this tool, whether it's a good tool or a bad tool, in the right hands, is it in the right hands? And I don't have good answers for that yet, but my concerns, as much as I really think it has value as a law enforcement tool when it is controlled properly, as our department aims to do, I'm just not sure about being able to trust this company going forward. If with the right approach and mindset, I might be more willing to accept that they screwed up and that they're trying to correct it, but I'm not sure that's the case. So if we're looking for the IPA to really fill some of these gaps, and for those who don't know our independent police auditor, who's been with us for 18, 19 years now and has real credibility in the community for their true independence and their expertise, what's the scope of work? The staff report gives a brief summary, and it is that it would review, this is at the bottom of page 6, the staff report, conduct an operational assessment of their policies and procedures around security, transparency, sharing compliance, and reporting of system features and changes. Those are strong elements. And they're also going to assess our own internal policies and procedures to see if there's any way that we can do even better. But the more we dive into this, I really want to know the details of the scope of work of the IPA. And that's not an attachment, is it?
It is not, Councilmember Burt. So there's one complexity here, which is that there's I believe there's a staff report coming to council before the summer recess that involves an extension of the IPA's contract, which is necessary for them to do the work because the work will fall after the expiration of their current agreement. Nonetheless, we've been in conversation with them. They've committed to doing the work, and we're working through what that scope will look like.
So in our role, our critical role in oversight, I really want to see the specifics of what the IPA study is going to be, not the summary. So how can we have that information and basically approve of that scope of work before it goes forward so that when we get it back, we're going to feel like we had as good answers as we could obtain?
I think there are two pieces to it. One is the extension of the contract, which is a fairly routine matter, and then there's the specifics on this analysis. I think we'll need to look at the timing of when the IPA will next be before you as part of their semi-annual study session with the council, and whether that would occur in time for them to give you more specificity before they finalize the flock specific work.
Well,
Because
and
again,
I'm not looking for them to give those specifics before they finalize it. I'm looking for them to give them before they begin on the scope and working on the project, so that we are buying in to exactly what's going to be evaluated by the IPA. Not that it comes back and we go, oh, gee, I wish it had done X and Y instead of what was assigned to it. We've got this responsibility. This set of elected officials ultimately has that oversight responsibility, and I don't want to be hoping and guessing that the scope is the one that we would like to see.
understood. We're going to need to work with OIR in order to see how best to accomplish that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, well, thank you, Chief. I really do appreciate you digging deep into this and continuing to do so that we can sort out this troubling issue, honestly. It's troubling to live with flock. It's troubling to live without it. It's something we really need to sort out further to get it right. You know, there is, as my colleagues have mentioned, sort of this coalescence of growing distrust with some of our federal government behavior. There's also a growing distrust of the tech industry and AI, and this is kind of this messy intersection of both. And then, of course, this particular company there's been some trouble with, and you put all of that together, and things like side door access start to sound less improbable. And I think those are the kinds of things that we really want to dig deeply into. That said, I have to admit that one of the examples you gave could well have been my block. I don't know that it was. I don't know that it wasn't. But we had a rash of burglaries like I'd never seen in the 35 years I'd lived there. There's one down the block, and there was one right next door, one a few houses on up, all within a period of days. The scary thing was that when the parents were out, the son was home when the break-in happened, like an 11-year-old kid. But he was playing video games, so he had the headphones on, had no idea that this person had come in and out, and the parents came home and saw the broken stuff and were terrified. And I can tell you the terror amongst my neighbors was profound. The emails that were flying around, and so I did ask, you know, some of the officers to come to our block and meet with us and talk about the different tools and techniques they would use to try to quell this rash where people are breaking into our homes. And they used various tools. I don't know if it was this one. I have reasons to believe it might have been, and stopped. So, you know, I don't know, but these are the things we have to balance. These are real world implications in Palo Alto, good and bad, from this technology. So I have a couple of questions that would at least help me understand things a little bit better. If we can go back to just some of the basic use of this technology. So we had on one of the slides, slide 5, a picture of the form that gets filled out. And, you know, it talks about, at the top, it's a little hard to read on the paper, so let me go to my computer here. So it has offense type, case number, and reason up at the top. And, you know, it shows that the case number and the reason are required, but the offense type is not a required entry. And I'm trying to square that. I'm just not knowledgeable enough. Later on, it talks about requiring a documented FBI, NIBRS, or NIBRS, I don't know how you say that, case type for all searches. I don't know which of those that is, and I don't know why the offense type is not requisite. Could you just explain a little bit more about those fields?
It is. So if you look, I don't know why the parenthetical required is not in that box, but if you look in the upper right-hand corner, the key, it shows the asterisk refers to required fields, and you'll see that all 3 of those fields have the red asterisk next to it. I can also tell you as a practical matter, as a user, if you don't complete all 3 of those boxes, it will not affect a search.
Okay, so I want to try to link up those 3 boxes then to the legitimate law enforcement purpose that was talked about in the staff report. Because when we do an audit and we audit the legitimate law enforcement purpose, what do we look at? Do we look at those 3 boxes, or do we look at, for example, the supporting documents in a case file? Do we, and I'm thinking particularly of, you know, outside of PAPD, because I think that that's where a lot of the concern is, that we don't want some rogue officer elsewhere to, you know, put in some offense and maybe it doesn't quite match the underlying police report or whatever the other stuff is. So could you just describe that process a little bit of auditing the legitimate law enforcement purpose?
Sure. So just so we can follow what would appear in each of those 3 boxes. So each of those you'll note, or excuse me, the offense type and reason you'll notice are both drop-down fields. So those are pre-selected options that the officer must choose as opposed to a free-form entry. The offense type refers to, which you referred to earlier, there's a standardized set of FBI offense types that are used for stat keeping nationwide that we routinely use for all kinds of reporting. That is what's now required in that box by all users, regardless of Palo Alto or otherwise. And there's a finite list of those. There's probably about 100 different offense types that are FBI compliant. The case number box is whatever your agency case number format would be. The reason box is required by us, but is not inherently required by Flock. So in other words, if anyone, our own users or another user is doing a search that would hit Palo Alto data, we require that they make that entry, but other agencies can have different rules reciprocally, if that makes sense. That reason box is more of a layperson's articulation of the search, so burglary investigation, homicide investigation, something like that, with less code specificity as the offense type box. On our end, what we're doing as part of our monthly audit is we're taking a random sampling of officer queries, and we're matching up the case number to what's being queried to make sure that there's a legitimate relationship between what's being queried and the case upon which it's being attributed. And we do that with other types of databases our officers use as well. So in other words, if we see that plate number 1234 has been queried, we're going to pull up case number 1234 and make sure that there's some relationship between that plate number that's being queried and that report or that witness statement, et cetera.
Yeah. Just to be clear, you said you'd check the case number. You actually check the case file, it sounds like, and look to see.
Correct. Yes. So as you point out, we don't have the ability to do that with the same level of detail when it relates to other law enforcement agencies. So in other words, for other law enforcement agencies, really the only ability we have to do by way of an audit is a couple of things. When we run our outside agency or network audit, we're looking to make sure, A, that only agencies with whom we have an MOU are doing queries, so that's sort of item number one. Item number two is to make sure that the offense type was in fact entered and it's a NIBRS compliant one, which now should be a given that it's a drop-down requirement, that a reason's been entered that's compliant, and then that a case number has been entered as opposed to just, space barring over or putting in some sort of gibberish. We don't have the ability to look at other agencies' cases. So we do rely upon those MOUs that are signed by the executives at the other agency, where they commit to the fact that they will only be using our data in compliance with applicable California law, and that they have their own auditing standards. I'll tell you that it's best practice in the law enforcement industry with regard to a variety of law enforcement databases to do the kind of auditing that I described for our internal searches. So I expect that's happening elsewhere.
Yeah, and that's, as you were speaking, what I was thinking is, could we, there could be other reasons, but that it might be hard, but could we, in the MOU, require reciprocal auditing practices as well, so that even if we can't go look in their case file, they're doing that. That would be something I'd be interested in having explored when we come back. And it'd be interesting if I don't know if our auditor can somehow sort out how many of the people with whom we have MOUs also do those audits where they actually look into the case file. But that would make me somewhat more comfortable.
So I think we could update the content of our MOUs. I'll point out that when we started doing business with Flock and indicated we wanted to predicate our sharing on individualized MOUs, they only had one other customer in their entire customer client base that was doing that. And so we've largely been kind of trailblazing on that and evolving the MOU as we go along, so we can certainly continue to do that.
Okay, that's interesting. Just a quick technical question. You mentioned that some of these, there's some uses that are not criminal, such as finding somebody with memory loss who might be wandering, et cetera. What do you do then when you don't have a criminal offense type for these boxes?
So offense types can include missing and endangered people or suicidal subject.
Okay, thank you, that's helpful. Then in terms of the data from these cameras, where does it live? Are these Flock servers somewhere in a server farm outside? I mean, where does that data live?
Yes, so part of what we pay Flock for is encrypted cloud storage of the data. So we don't have on-site servers for the data.
So that 30-day deletion practice, do we audit that it's actually deleted?
So I'd have to defer to our IT professionals on the particulars of that. I know that issue was raised at the time we initiated the contract, so I don't have a ready answer to what process exists for that.
Sure. Well, that could be something else the IPA could look into, because that would also be helpful. So now I want to just talk a little bit about the past and what I'm going to call Flock's breach, because as far as I can tell, that was a contractual term that they breached. So, we've been looking at the damages to us, but I'm interested in a penalty for them. If it was a criminal, I don't know if that state law was in effect at the time that they didn't tell us about and that they had this nationwide sharing, but I don't know what the statute of limitations is, but boy, if I was an executive at that company, I'd be a little nervous. So I'm not necessarily asking you for your opinion on that, but I think that's something else that I'd be curious to understand more about, because we do have some concerns about the particular executives. So that is an interesting thing. But something we could do something about is to talk about both the damages to us in terms of all the time we're putting into even this hearing tonight, based on some of their practices, the money we've expended on auditors and will expend on auditors, they should pay for all of that, I think, or at least we should explore that in a contract renegotiation. In addition, something that I would like to discuss when this comes back is some sort of penalty or liquidated damages or whatever one wants to call it for any future breach that could be, at a high enough amount that it could serve as a deterrent, because these folks were hearing a lot about how this is a profit-driven company. Well, you pull out the profits and, that could be as much of a deterrent as anything. So I think that those kinds of things would help us in our evaluation. Were we to continue, I think if we felt better about audits, basically all the things I've talked about, the deletion of data, any penalty for past acts so that they know we're serious, that this is not okay, and any agreed upon penalties that are enforceable for future bad acts would at least help the conversation. So those are my thoughts about what I'd like to discuss more when we come back. And Mr. Rickdahl, one more time.
One last question. You mentioned how valuable it was to overlay data from other jurisdictions. So if we went the Campbell route and just did it ourselves, we wouldn't be able to do that. But if we went, let's say, Santa Clara County, how valuable would be Santa Clara County? Would that give you enough jurisdictions, or do you need East Bay, do you need San Mateo County to join in to make it useful?
So I would say any sharing would be better than operating in a vacuum. With that, I would say to flesh out the example I used earlier with the dozens of residential burglaries, the majority of those happened over in Newark, Fremont, and Union City, so in a whole other county. So we know that frequently our offenders are coming from even outside the county and are offending in a variety of cities throughout multiple Bay Area counties. So I certainly would think there would be a loss of value if we were to only be in a network that was joined with the sheriff's office. I will say to your question, though, I'm not personally, nor is the department, wedded to Flock as a vendor. I do see the value in the tool that they are providing us now. If another vendor presented itself either through our proactive collaboration and driving that, or simply by market forces, and there were another vendor in this space with good market penetration, I would certainly be open to entertaining another vendor.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Well, I see no further lights, so I think we're ready to close up this item with certainly our thanks for answering all our questions and being here, and we look forward to taking up again next time.